I guess to recap before we move on to the next section. So key characteristics, clear and agreed upon goals. So there's a whole episode on goal setting. Go listen to it. Right people, right roles. So making sure, if you've got your extroverts in sales roles, things like that, making sure you understand people's strengths and weaknesses, and then make sure they're in the right role. If they've got weaknesses, assist them with building on those weaknesses. If they haven't identified those weaknesses, let them know. Effective leadership, so applying, if you can, if you've got multiple leadership styles, applying the right one in the right stage. If you lead a certain way and you find it effective, then be authentic to that. If that's an effective leadership style, because sometimes if you try to put on a facade, it's probably not going to be effective. And then the last one is open communication and building that psychological safety. So everyone has a voice, they feel heard, and you're all on the bus and going towards common goal.
We're all part of this old money game. This old.
Welcome back to another episode of Beers and Business. I'm Abe Dearmer, CEO of Ipsemba.
I'm Andrew Martin, CEO of Teamgate CRM. And what are we up to? 28?
Yes, 28.
28.
Today we're talking about high-performing teams and how you can create them and using some of our experience. So we'll do our weekly wrap, talk about high-performance teams, and then give some real-world examples as we go.
Beauty. What are we drinking today, mate?
I have the Nosy Bob, which I've had before. It's a red ale, 1.5 standard drinks. Nice colour, fruity flavour. Really nice red ale.
I've got two red ales in my fridge, and they're the worst beer I've ever had in my life. But it wasn't from Devil's
See Bob on there with no nose. Got kicked off by a horse. This is the hangman.
It looks like the bloke out of there's a new show. What's it called? It's based on a video game. Anyway, moving on.
Redwood, A Dead Redemption.
Nah. It's around a nuclear thing in Survivors. Anyway, what have I got? Have got Fallout. Yeah, the dude in Fallout.
Yeah,
looks like him.
Yeah, it does a bit.
New beer, new
That's
brewery.
A cool one.
So
look at that.
Black Flag Brewing, which is again a Sunshine Coast.
Pirates, right? Black Flags.
Local, brewing company. So they're up in Mooloolaba and one other location, I believe. So this is the Astropunk XPA.
Astropunk. You're liking XPAs at the moment.
Flavor notes, bitterness 2 out of 5, but radness 5 out of 5. There you go.
Look at him. He's going to be way more rad by the time this is over.
It just says this beer is a good time. So let's try it out. Nice
Mate, it's always a good time when you're on the Beers and Business podcast, let me tell you what.
Yeah, not many bad times drinking beers at 9 a.m, but nice, beautiful colour. Smells a bit fruity.
It's a good red ale. I like that. How are the citrus notes, mate?
It's probably fruitier than probably the other XPAs I've had, but it's nice. Yeah. It's not overbearing. Nice beer.
Nice, that's good, mate. How's the week?
A couple of others to finish off, and how cool is
Actually, we should bring up as well that we've got some beers. We've ordered some beers packs, so we're going to be drinking the same beer coming up pretty soon, probably 2 weeks away. But yeah, we've got some beer packs. Looking forward to it.
So yeah, we can experience the same beers at the same time. There you go.
Yeah,
look at us.
I bet you Andrew will bring the wrong beer,
or I'll drink it in my spare time, and then I won't have it for the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, you know that beer that we're meant to have? Yeah, I've got to wait for another order to come in. Yeah. How's the week though, mate?
How has the week been? I don't even know. It's been a bit of a blur. Obviously, doing a lot of university at the moment, so balancing work in university, but
a lot of ChatGPT.
Two big projects. So we did our upgrade of our email integration, which we've been putting off for months and months and months because we were terrified of it going wrong. Completed it with only one customer had an issue. So
nice. That's good. That's a success.
Massive success. So shout out to my man Stan, who is our
Stan the
dev,
man.
Planned it and executed it almost perfectly. So yeah, we got that one
almost perfectly.
That one over the line.
Stan, room for improvement, mate.
And we're finalising the last fixes of our MVP for the mobile app. So that should be submitted to the App Store very soon for publishing. So yeah, 2 very big projects that we've had on our list probably for 2 years, probably since we started it at Teamgate, have been ticked off this week. So it gives us a lot of breathing room.
Definitely that mobile app.
Yeah, definitely the mobile
That's
app.
a big one. I'm really excited. I've been testing the mobile app. It's really cool.
It is. It is. It's
I
going to
think
open up
it's
a lot of doors and a few different industries for us to test as well now, right? Because
really good product for an MVP. Really good product. Super excited to see how you guys expand on it as well with some of the feedback that you get. But for now, like when I look at it, I'm like, man, it actually allows me to not have to log onto my computer to do what I need to do in Teamgate, which is the aim of the mobile app, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we held back from going crazy with it. We just wanted something very simple that, we're like, what will people actually use this for? Instead of, going all
Instead
the
of
bells and
building out
whistles,
this big thing that takes
let's
you
build out
a
what's
year,
actually needed. Yeah.
build out the minimum
that's what we've done.
product and then get people's feedback and say, hey, this is the biggest problem that developers make, right? Is they try to create this perfect developed tool. It's like, you should just release it and someone will say, hey, you should get this feature. Oh, I didn't think of that. We should put that on next because everyone's asked for that. Actual lead the growth by talking to customers instead of sitting there in your little isolated bubble saying, everyone's going to love this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. So we'll probably release it as an MVP. We'll ask for feedback, and then some. We've already got some other things spinning up for version 2 as we speak. So yeah, we just want to get it out as it is, and then we'll look at things like voice to text and some other cool features that we can make sales people's lives easier when they're on the road. So yeah, what about you?
At Appsembler, we've got our upgrade to OpenEdX Redwood on the way for our LMS, which is really, really cool. Includes some back-end fixes as well, which is going to be really exciting. But Redwood's really cool, like full user interface upgrade. It's a bit of using open source. A lot of the quiz components that come with it is upgraded, email functions upgraded. When you look at from learner experience, course creator to admin, all aspects of that have improved out of sight. So really excited to see that roll out to all our customers, which we aim to try and get that done for everyone by the end of the year. And then our virtual labs migration is almost complete, which is allowing us to scale the labs up a lot quicker. So that's really exciting to see how that goes. So once again, we want to sort of have that everyone over by end of this year or by January next year. And then what else? Man, it just seems like there's a lot of people that have a lot of initiatives that then results in like a lack of priority across the board. So I'm seeing a lot of people come in and they're like, yeah, we want to do this. We really want to do this. But then they're like, but I've also been like the last week I've been working on these other 2 projects. We had this new thing that we're doing. And it's like, I don't know. Is it a sign that there is a series of economic flurry because everyone thinks that we're like on the other side of something? Or is it less people trying to do more things? I don't know which one it is. I feel like it might be less people trying to do more things.
Well, I think that's the case for us.
Yeah.
It's really hard if you've got to. You need to learn to say no sometimes, or just say, hey, this is priority 1. These are supporting efforts, and if you get through priority 1 and you've got space or capacity, then you look at those supporting efforts.
Yeah, it sounds like something a high-performing team would do.
Exactly. Good topic.
What was your learning of the week, mate?
Learning of the week. So SEO, constant battle. So we've done some episodes on SEO before.
I had to laugh at your experience this week. I was like, it's typical.
Push. I had a blog which is very specific to my ICP. It was, sitting on the 3rd page of Google when you search for a particular search term. Did a big campaign to get some backlinks to it to increase the quality of the blog, and we got to page 1, which was a big success, big celebrations. Our impressions went through the roof. Our clicks went through the roof. I think our clicks 10x or 20x overnight. And then they fell off a cliff, and we're back on page 3 instead of page 2, which we were originally. So not sure why. So going to do some digging into that. We're continuing to build links. Yeah, we didn't get any warnings from Google Search Console or anything like that around performance and why it was punished. But yeah, so
the black box that is Google strikes again.
A constant battle, and it just proves how you've got to stay consistent. You've got to be updating blogs all the time, continuing to put out new content, because you might have one blog that performs really, really, really well, and one day it might fall off a cliff. So you've got to have that other content there ready to pick up the slack if you need it. So that's my learning is
Yeah,
SEO.
and that's where I think is that you shouldn't rest on your laurels with SEO. If you got like one high performing blog, or you're getting a lot of leads from one blog, still strive to find that next big thing, because you never know when Google will just decide they want to take that away from you.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I think, a lot of our high performing blogs are around integration. So I think a big thing for me is to start actually improving my integration pages on the website. So, if a blog falls away, I've still got that integration page performing well as a backup.
Yeah, hopefully so. All right.
What do you got?
My one is about lists. Lists are so important. Every time I feel off track, or I feel like, man, there's so much to do, I don't know where to start, I just write it down. And I write down a list. And I often find if I don't maintain a list, I'll miss stuff and things won't get done. And so a big thing for me, and look, this can take many different forms. I've used different types of forms before. One thing I found is actually really good is just having like in the US, they call them legal pads. But for us, it's just like a little notepad sitting on your desk, and you write stuff down, and then you consolidate that at a certain period of time into like a priority list. Because I find like you'd be on call with someone, and Andrew, you might say like, oh yeah, send us over a quote. And I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll send over a quote. But you don't want to like go, oh, how do I type that down? Like we've got grain recorders in there and stuff like that. Like, yeah, okay, they're effective, but it's hard to capture all that information unless there was some like insert into TeamGate through AI of, well, like, hey, create a task, Abe to send over a quote. There you go. Get that in your integration. But you write down a legal pad like send Andrew a quote, and you just leave it there, because you might jump straight to the next call, which is often the case for us. And so it's like send Andrew a quote, legal pad, and at the end of the day, you consolidate that list, and you're like, yep, sweet. Priority for tomorrow is to send Andrew that quote, or even like, oh shit, I need to get that done today. Send Andrew that quote, get it all done. And so I feel like if you ever are starting to feel like there's a lot and you could potentially be becoming overwhelmed, write a list, and I guarantee you'll feel 100% better.
Yeah, and I've got a massive list that I probably will never work through, but yeah, I'm the same. Using a list, I think if you can take it one step further, once you do prioritize it, put stuff in your calendar, but definitely a list is where that all stems from. So whether it's a notepad, like you've used like the quadrant before, so prioritizing it that way. But yeah, I've got a list, and we always tell people that move into our like similar roles to us, you can have a list, but you're not always going to get through it. So making sure
way more than you can chew off in one day,
and then prioritize, and just accept you're not going to get that whole list done in a day. Prioritize and adapt.
But you feel better because at the end of the day, you know it's there on the list, and it's like you can shut it off. But if you don't have a list, you just have all these thoughts that are constantly pumping through your brain, and it's very hard. But as you got a list, it makes life a lot easier. But on to the quotes of the week. I'm going to pull one out. This is a deep one that I, not so much the quotes deep, but one I haven't thought about in a long time. It's probably been about 5 years since I've thought about Dave Hackworth. But reading his books and things like that, he really knew how to develop a team. So Colonel Dave Hackworth, if people listen to like Jocko Willink, they probably would have heard him. I'm pretty sure Joe Rogan's talked about him as well. But he wrote a really good book called About Face, and definitely worthwhile reading. Dude was in like Vietnam, Korea, created the Raiders and stuff like that in Korea. Really, really cool guy. Really hard man, but knew how to develop a team really, really well. So his quote here is, great leaders believe in their people. They get their people to believe in themselves. So that's a really big thing, right? Is that you need to believe in your team that they have the ability, they have the skills to get things done. But more than that, you need to create the belief in them. And I think that's a really big thing that people struggle with, is that they give like this surface level praise or surface level belief, like, oh, you can do it, I have faith in you. But people are like, doesn't really sound like it. And so being able to really get them to believe in themselves is the true mark of a great leader.
Yeah, and I think that surface level, oh, you can do it, is a lot of times just people palming off work to someone else that they don't want to do. So I think tying in, you've got to have that trust established, train your people, and then empower them to do the things by themselves, and give them that mission command, I guess you could call it. What is mine? Mine is from the man Mark Cuban, which actually triggered the thoughts around this episode. So I'm actually doing a university assessment on Mark Cuban at the moment around his leadership styles. So his quote is, "You need to turn over every rock and open every door to learn your industry. The process never ends." So we find this ourselves, especially in the industries where
Man, you open up a door and then there's like 10 more.
Changing. Yeah, it's constantly changing. Your competition's constantly changing. They're bringing out new things that you need to adapt to. The market changes, the economy changes. So, making sure your fingers on the pulse. And you're uncovering every rock. Things like Reddit have been massive rocks that we've turned over.
I just love it how we're like tag teaming Reddit posts now.
Yeah.
But
it's like
it gets results, right?
I did a lot of work on LinkedIn for many years, and it didn't really generate much. And I don't think, for me, my target audience are people that look for help. I think LinkedIn is people that are like, this is me, this is my thoughts.
Yeah, they're not really looking for help. They're looking to preach.
They're preachers. They're not the people going to look for work for help. So yeah, if we didn't turn over that rock, we never would have uncovered a potential source of leads. So we'll continue to test that. I think we're going to expand that into different social media platforms, Facebook communities and things like that, where mum and dad shops live, the sole traders and things like that. So that's my quote of the week.
Yeah, nice. That's really cool. I like that. And I completely agree with it. And no matter what industry you're in, it's absolutely true. There's always something you can learn of someone else. There's always another rock that you can turn over. I think we do ourselves a bit of a disservice by not focusing in those areas all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's jump into some high performance teams and let's talk about this. So I guess like a bit of background to, Andrew and I. So me personally, like I've been involved in teams my whole life. Team sports as a child played a massive role in my life and everything that I do. And I feel like that transitioned across into military life where it was a team and leading a team. And I mean, we've both been leaders in teams for a pretty significant amount of time in different situations between like disaster relief, on operations, outfield. And some of the hardest times to lead a team is actually not what you think it'd be. It's actually just being in barracks doing nothing.
Mundane, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest time to be, to generate these high-performing teams and to give people a purpose and to make people want to turn up and go towards a common goal. And, the definition of a high-performance team that we've been able to find is, a team is a small number of people with complementary skills. And I think that's like a really key bit, complementary skills, and all the same people, committed to a common purpose, performance goals, and mutual accountability. Now, I think that often people are really good at getting aligned to performance goals. We are okay at a common purpose, but we suck at mutual accountability. That's my opinion on those three elements of a high-performing team, what they're committed to. We always set performance goals. We often will show what the purpose is and get people aligned to the purpose, but we suck at having mutual accountability. And the mutual accountability generally is the worst between the leader and the subordinates in that team. So forgive us if we use more militaristic, hierarchical terms during the leadership, but I think a team needs a leader and there needs to be subordinates, whether that be, I've seen teams where the leader isn't the person of the highest rank or position. It's actually someone who is of a lower rank or position, but has the leadership ability to lead the team, and they do a fantastic job of it. Whereas I've seen people who are the highest rank have great leadership ability. I mean, it doesn't really, when we say, leader and subordinate, I think it's important to realize that that's not a hierarchical position. That's literally fluid sometimes it depends on the situation that you're in. So someone might be a professional at, let's say, sea kayaking, and they're a leader when you go sea kayaking, but you put them in like a tactical field environment and they have no idea what they're doing. So different skill sets, different times. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think you and I, we're kind of lucky because we've had the experience of being probably in both, like low-performing teams is generally what we get thrown into in our current role, right? Like acquisitions happen for a reason, and generally it's because the team is performing below expectations. In our past, we've been in very high performing teams, whether it be sport, whether it be military. But I think, yeah, like you said, in regards to leadership, it comes in so many different types and forms, right? And if we want to get technical, I speak to military candidates about this all the time, is the difference between leadership and command. So command in a military context is the person with the rank. If we think of a school, who's in command of a school, it's a principal, because they're the person with the highest leadership or highest role. But when we talk about leadership, it's that art of influence. So everyone's going to lead differently. There's so many different ways that you can complete a task, right? There's the authoritative type leaders. There's the follow me leaders. Like there's, I'm not getting into technical terms. I'm talking general here, but it's that art of influence. So when we're talking about a school context, you could have really good teachers or really poor teachers, and it might be dependent on their leadership style and the effectiveness, based on that school classroom. And it's the same thing in teams, right? Your best player might not be the captain. It might be the person that can influence the team towards the goal. It might be someone with maturity or something like that. So, yeah, I think when we talk today, we'll try to give context around, building a high-performing team from scratch, or trying to turn a team around that's, might be underperforming and needs some realignment. But, yeah, I guess that's my 2 cents. And the reason we're talking this topic is on the weekend, I was down in Brisbane for university, and this was one of the topics of conversation. And it was baffling to me, the amount of people in the classroom that were in teams or even in leadership positions, but, were still in the dark around, even just what's the difference between like a working group versus a team? What's the expectation? You might have a high performing working group.
That's a good point. We take for granted the skills that we developed over time. Like, not everyone's played team sport. We don't place enough emphasis on the leadership skills that are gained through your training in the army, and then actually going out. I feel like going out and doing it is a lot more realistic and gives you a lot more opportunities to develop. But we don't put enough stock in that. Like, you got to remember, a lot of people get thrown into a manager or leader position in a company, and they've been analysts their entire life, and they're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And it's like, and they like, Andrew will be calling and being like, hey, I need help with something. You're like, no, like, I don't have time for that. But you're a leader, you're a manager. You have to have time for it because that's your job. And it's like, you towards a common goal, you need to train people, but you see it as like a burden on you getting your work done, as opposed to taking it as an opportunity to grow the team. And I think there's like a lot of things that people just don't know about leadership.
Yeah, exactly. And that was evident in the MBA class as well. It's funny because you can relate it back to, like, we talk military all the time because that's our experience. But, I had a good conversation with one of the ladies in my class, and she was recently she was like an analyst, right? She was on the ground, on the tools with the people, and then she's been thrust into this leadership position. She's like, oh, like, I'm no longer part of the clique. Like, they go out for social drinking and stuff, and like, I'm like, oh, bye. Like, it's lonely at the top. I say that we say that to our soldiers, right? How many soldiers come through and they're one of the boys, and then they get promoted to corporal, and all of a sudden they're in charge, and now the boys are like, you're telling me what to do.
It's that chat
like,
you have, right? It's like, hey, you just got to know now that but if you're sometimes a sign of a good leader is that they don't want you around anymore.
Yeah,
because they see you've excelled to a new height.
Yeah. And that's and like leadership versus likership, which is probably a whole nother topic we could get into. But yeah, there's a time and a place for all of that. And
but I want to caveat that
different
with
leadership style that you take on.
Being a leader doesn't mean you have to be a dick.
Yeah,
which is what 100%. Probably like 50% of the leaders out there are like, I just have to be a dick.
80% of the military.
I think 80's a bit high.
That's up there.
80's a bit high. It is up there. It is up there. I think you remember the poor ones more than you remember the good ones. Yeah, so it makes it tough.
Definitely. It's like teachers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that people often get this misconception that, to be a leader, I just have to be an arsehole, and then people who do what I say just tell people. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Simon Sinek does a really good TED Talk, I think, on leadership. Why? Getting to why. But while we're talking about high-performance teams is, yes, it's a gap that a lot of people don't know, but it's also super important to getting to the business outcome for your organisation. Like the majority of people that I talk to running small businesses, you know, the biggest problem is staff. It's hiring staff. It's like staff being inappropriate in whatever way, like taking the piss with like, you know, hours before they're meant to start shift and being like, oh, I need today off, or my car broke down, or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you need to be a leader to like, so they know that's not the right thing to do. And you need to tell them what's on the line about doing that sort of stuff. And like, you need to be able to set boundaries and be effective. Oh, Andrew's got a distraction.
No, I was going to turn the fan on. It's hot. This Queensland heat's getting back to me.
Queensland heat.
Yeah, I definitely think. I think why we're talking about it is the benefits of a high performing team, right? If you've got a high performing team, and people they probably think they're in a high performing team, and when we go through this, you might not be. You might be on your way, but I would say Teamgate's not there yet.
High performing teams is like very.
We went
very
through the criteria. During the class, I was like, yeah, we do this, we do this, we do this. A big thing that we lacked is around accountability, and that mutual accountability. Exactly what you said in the intro, right? So yeah, we'll talk through that.
We didn't synchronize on that earlier as well.
Yeah, but obviously some of the benefits which we'll get to. But if you've got a team that's in harmony, let's call it harmony, we're going towards the same common goal. We're all on the bus, so to speak. Yeah. There's a sense of trust. There's a sense of what do we call it? Psychological safety, where people can voice their opinions and not think they're going to get destroyed. That leads to massive things around innovation, around product improvements, around process improvements. We'll jump into
well, that's what I think. Let's talk about the key characteristics of high-performing teams. And the first one there is that clear and agreed-upon goals. And I think this is a really important piece that we talk about all the time, right? It's OKR, SMART goals, whatever you want to put in place. Turn the fan on, mate. Don't let anyone see your skinny legs. So the clear and agreed-upon goals. So I think like this is a real key bit. Goals, once again, I'll break it down. Goals we're good at. We love giving goals. Clear goals, we're okay at. Agreed upon goals, we're probably pretty shit at. I would say majority of the time. And the way I look at this is, the way I like to do it is I say, like, and I think I did this with you, Andrew, when you first started. It's like, tell me what you want to achieve in the next quarter with Teamgate. And you'd come to me with like, all right, here's my goals. And we'd talk through it and be like, okay, why do you want to do this? You want to do this? Okay, that's a pretty good point. Let's do that. Let's make it clearer though. Like lay it out like this: SMART goal, fail criteria, everything like that. And you're like, boom, there's a clear and agreed upon goal. Whereas if I was to just go, Andrew, here's your goals for the quarter, off you go. They might be goals, or they're probably going to be goals. They may or may not be clear because we haven't really discussed it properly. Chances are they're probably not going to be agreed upon. You'd be like, why the hell am I doing this? This is bullshit. Like, I shouldn't have to do this.
There's no buy-in either.
Yeah, it's no buy-in, right? So, but if I get you to make them, you then bring them to me, we refine them, potentially add some in. It's like a mutual process, and you feel like that you've been heard. And that's part of a high-performing team.
And the other thing is, like, if you go through the SMART process and it's a discussion or a collaboration, one of the big things you're going to ask is this achievable? If I set you a goal that's unrealistic, generally 9 times out of 10, the employee's going to quit, or he's not going to not quit, but quit that goal or not work towards that goal
just
because
not
they think it's unachievable. So there's no buy-in. So yeah, a collaborative approach is really good. Obviously, there's going to be some sort of strategic goals and direction that you're heading in. For me, I think a lesson learned from coming into failing businesses is, when an acquisition happens, what's the first thing that happens when you acquire a business and you speak with the team? They're terrified. They think they're going to lose their jobs. They don't know why it's happened. It's the unknown. But if you can be clear around this is the clear position of the company. If things trend and continue the way they are, the company is going to go out of business. This is the strategic intent. This is why we're going in this direction. And that is clear down to the, might be the sales rep. If they all understand that and they're on board with that, you're going to have so much more success and you're going to have so much more buy-in. It's not going to be this us versus them for a leadership team coming into a new team. It's going to be start to build that culture and team environment.
Yeah, completely agree with that as well. Next one is right people, right roles. So this, I think, is, I don't know, sometimes we don't really get to choose, would be what I would say. And I would say actually majority of the time we don't get to choose. We sort of just have to deal with the hand that we're dealt. But what you have to do within that is you have to figure out what people's strengths and weaknesses are. And really good leaders are quick to sift through people and say, oh, this person's really good at executing. This person's really good at like thinking about things deeply. In a business sense, this person has a lean towards a creative side. We should get them to, create marketing campaigns, create the assets that we use and things like that. So it's just about understanding those roles a little bit more and starting to be like, okay, well, what specifically are people going to be good at, and drilling down on them. So I use an example of when I was in the military, I had lieutenants, and I'd start to realize like, okay, this person is more like analytical, less extroverted. I'll get them to do this specific task. This person's really physical. This person's really extroverted. I'll get them to do, let's just say like this one can join the mess committee and do like help with like financial stuff. That can be like a job that they do, like finance stuff. This person can, do admin and run things that someone else physical is going to actually execute on. This person's physical. So I'll get them to like run the ranges. I'll get them to plan like small team activities, things that require like that heavy hand to get stuff done. And so it's just about like understanding where people's strengths and weaknesses are. Like if you get a sales team, understand who's better at enterprise sales, like who is attentive and gets along with those enterprise deals versus, someone who might shoot from the hip, looking at, outbound, who's good at selling. This is a really important tool for when you are hiring as well, is to understand what exactly you want that person to do that's going to be on the team, because that'll be the personality traits that you look for.
Yeah, I think a big advantage of you and without giving you too much credit, you also do the flip side. So I remember when we worked together back in the military, yes, you'd match people to their strengths, but then you'd also be developing them in their weaknesses. So if, I was shit at military history, you made me do some presentation on something that I didn't want to do. But, developing those weaknesses whilst, yes, you're placing strengths to strengths, but also developing those weaknesses at the same time. Another example is probably, you and I both came into Teamgate at the same time. We won't mention names, where we had, the existing team had people in like sales roles and success roles that didn't want to talk to people. Like they refused to pick up the phone and call people. Like that is their sole responsibility, is to talk to people. So
sometimes you've got to put people in the uncomfortable. And I think back to when we both started at Teamgate, I'm like, hey, Andrew, you need to start doing sales calls. And you're like,
yeah.
What do you mean? I don't want to do that. And then like, and it sounds stupid, but like you've never done it before. It's the fear of the unknown. You're a reasonably introverted person. Like you didn't want to do the podcast. Here we are.
Yeah, 100%.
Things like that, right? But what it did was it opened up this new thing. Like I guess it's sort of like what P. Diddy did.
Pause.
But what I would say is that you didn't want to do sales. It's like, okay, well, send some sales emails, get on a discovery call, and you do those, and you'd be like, you know what, this isn't too bad. Actually, I'm pretty good at it, and you are good at it. And it turns out that it was actually just an uncovered or unearthed strength that you had, was to go through and do these sales calls. And so I think it's really important that you constantly test the waters of where people are at, because you might find a skill that someone is underdeveloped simply through their life experience, but they actually have a lot of natural ability to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And it forces you to adapt, right? When you like, oh, you're doing sales now, I'm like, oh, well, it forces me to go and learn the product like inside out, because I don't want to make a fool of myself on a sales call. But yeah, I think to nest and summarize this, right people, right roles, it also probably means assessing your existing team. If you've hired a sales rep and they're extremely introverted and don't want to talk to people, and they're not willing to develop those skills, it's potentially time to either move them, consider another role, or move them on completely. So that probably falls under the same sort of category. The next one talks about effective leadership. Like I said before, leadership is like the art of influence, right? So everyone, if you meet 5 different military officers, you're probably going to meet 5 people that lead in different ways. Some are really effective, some are ineffective. But the big thing is, whilst I'm let's say a coaching style leadership or a, follow me leader, right? This is how you do it. I'll show the example. Now you do it. right? Or I set the example, follow me, like a pace setting leader style. That's going to be really effective in situations where you've built trust and you have established rapport with your team, and once I show the way, they'll do their own thing. Whereas coming into an underperforming team where you and I have both done it, where there's previously been no standards established, no expectations, no goals, you probably need to take on a more authoritarian role, right? This is how we're going to do it. This is why we're doing it. And then we'll reassess, in a couple of months. That weeds out the people that don't want to get on the bus. And it also gives some probably structure that wasn't there previously. So, everyone I'm sure has heard of, the forming, storming, norming, performing stages of building a team. So whether it's in those stages that your leadership style sort of changes or adapts, or whether it's an individual base, if you've got a certain employee who just takes the piss, or they need a lot more mentoring and coaching and direction, you might take a different leadership style than that you take with your head of sales, who's a manager, and that might be more consultative, more coaching, more mentoring them to develop their skills and take it to the next step.
Yeah, I think it's leadership's one of those things that it's so multifaceted. It's really hard to, you need, what's the old thing, leaders aren't born, they're made, or something like that. Is leadership learned?
Molded.
Is it a learnt function? And I think it is a learnt function, but you need to have that adaptability to different situations, which I think is so important, where someone needs that hard hand to get them motivated and let them learn, whereas some people just need hey, go and achieve this, and they're like, no worries, got it, and they go, and you don't see them again, and they come back and go, yeah, I did all that, this is how I did it, and you're like, sweet, no worries, but you're fine, you did it how I would have done it. And it all comes through experience of working together. I know that I could just tell you, hey, Andrew, we need to go and redesign this, you go do it, and you'd be like, yep, sweet, no worries, and then you come back and be like, what do you think? We're like, yeah, it looks great, let's just fix this and this, things that you generally just don't see because you're so in it at the moment. Totally. It's hard to see things sometimes. Nothing major, it's just minor things, and it's great, you've done it, that's awesome. Whereas other people, you need to be okay, now let's walk through the process, let's do it together, let's sit down, let's, and that's different stages of people's time. But I think having that ability to adapt that leadership links into the next point, which is talking about that psychological safety and open communication. Now, I don't want to sound like a big softy or something like that people would say, because, as you know, I'm a big, soft, cuddly teddy bear on the inside. But this is something that's really important, is that people need to be able to come to you and say, hey, I fucked up. And you say, how do we get you out of this now? Not in a deceptive way or trying to cover up for someone, but what's the best path to move forward with this? And, I mean, we've had discussions about a few different areas, right, where through your military career, where it's been I won't name them because but there's been times, and I've done it as well. I've called people as well in that same situation. It's been I fucked up. How do I get out of this? What's the best path forward here? And you ring those people or you talk to those people because they've had that ability to show you the leadership level that you needed at that particular time. Whether that be hand-holding, direction all the way through, whether that be a hard hand because you and you look back and you're like, I did really need that. I lacked motivation. I was being shit. Or whether they've had that, hey, the world is yours, go and do something. I think that sort of creates it. If you show that ability to be multifaceted in the leaderships, where people think great, I can come and talk to this person about something if something goes wrong.
Yeah, sort of. You always hear the open door policy in the military, and 9 times out of 10, it's not actually an open door policy. But being available to your employees, and you and I both, we do one-on-ones every week with our employees. You still do one-on-one with me each week, mentoring me, even though we're in different businesses now. So just having that ability, that rapport that's built. And for me, back in the military, I'd say I took on more of a consultative approach, follow me. But if I was yelling, people knew, hey, something's gone wrong here. If you're yelling all the time or you're on that authority, then people just get used to that. But if you're, hey, the job's on, let's go, and that's not every day, every minute, then people understand, okay, let's go. It's time to switch on here. If boss is yelling, there's something's gone wrong, or there's a reason, right? There's safety or something linked to that. I think a really good signal is like, I hate it, but if your employees like are open to coming to you and asking for like a raise, or they're, and the big thing for open communication, psychology of safety, if you're going to have like an innovation day or you're going to ask for feedback, get everyone's feedback. But if you're going to shut people's ideas down, give reasoning. This is a balance, because I've seen a lot of people go, oh yeah, we do open feedback, and Abe will say, I've got this idea, and then Andrew will say, oh, I've got this idea, and then the boss just goes, nah, we're going with this, and you don't know why.
Or worst case, you guys are idiots.
Yeah, like
you don't know what you're talking about.
All shut down. It's like, well, I gave you the chance to give your ideas, but I was always going with my idea. Like, actually listen to people and actually give feedback. Like, okay, I've had people come to me and ask for a raise, and I'll be completely transparent. This is the position that the company's in. If I give you a raise, this is what that's going to look like. Or we can do X, Y, and Z. And generally, they'll be on board with, okay, thanks for the transparency. I understand where we're at. We'll go with this plan.
And one of the best things I love about people who come to you with ideas is like, great, let's test it. But there's two ways to go about it. Like, great, test it. It'll like throw away, like, test it, whatever, test it. Or there's, great, let's test it. Let's talk about how we're doing that. And then you sit down and you go through and you're like, all right, great. I'm going to give you this amount of resources, have this time, do this, do that. We want to test it. When do we want to test it? Next quarter? Great. Let's do it then. Let's set goals around it, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, holy shit, like Andrew's just listened to me when I said I want to do something. He said, let's test it. But he didn't just say like, oh, test it flippantly. And then like, that's it. It's like, test it. Great. Let's talk through. Come to me next time we meet. Let's talk through how we're going to achieve it. And then you go through and you talk about how you're going to achieve it. And I think that's like a really important piece of leadership, is that you never dismiss something offhandedly when someone comes to talk to you, because at the end of the day, what you're going to do is you're just going to have people that'll stop coming to you because they know that they're just going to get these flippant responses that don't go anywhere. And they're like, well, what's the point of even bringing it up with you? It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Exactly. I guess to recap before we move on to the next section. So key characteristics, clear and agreed upon goals. So there's a whole episode on goal setting. Go listen to it. Right people, right roles. So making sure, if you've got your extroverts in sales roles, things like that, making sure you understand people's strengths and weaknesses, and then make sure they're in the right role to benefit from that. If they've got weaknesses, assist them with building on those weaknesses. If they haven't identified those weaknesses, let them know. Effective leadership. So applying, if you can, if you've got multiple leadership styles, applying the right one in the right stage. If you lead a certain way and you find it effective, then be authentic to that. If that's an effective leadership style, because sometimes if you try to put on a facade, it's probably not going to be effective. And then the last one is open communication and building that psychological safety. So everyone has a voice, they feel heard. And you're all on the bus and going towards a common goal. The next segment is the process of building a high-performing team. We won't spend a crazy amount of this, but we'll probably give some examples and vignettes as we go through. So what we'll talk about here is around the forming, storming, norming, and performing stages of building that team. So the first one is forming the team. So I think here it's definitely a consideration or something to be discussed around, are you forming a new team? Are you starting from scratch? Are you looking to form a new team? So for us in an acquisition, we obviously adopt the existing team at times, and then we'll bring in additional employees. Obviously the leadership changes. So you're going to immediately go through a forming, storming phase pretty quick. So yeah, there's definitely different considerations around that. I think the big thing is around HR. HR is so, I hate HR. HR, it's one of the subjects I dropped at uni because I just am not interested in it, but it is so important. Hiring the right people, which we've, again, done a full episode on, cultural fit, all that sort of stuff. But then once they're hired, making sure that you go through that training phase, that onboarding phase, this is our culture, this is our strategic intent, making sure that that fit is there, and then establishing those goals around the role that person is hired in. And I think a big thing that you and I have both learned is Everyone's on Zoom nowadays. Not everyone, but people definitely that work in our industry or global teams are very dislocated. If you're going through that building phase, the benefits of face-to-face are just unmatched. Like you and I can talk every week on Zoom, but the benefit of getting together, having a beer and working through things, you're going to get 10 times more done. If you're going into a new team, you're going to build that rapport. You're going to learn little quirky things about people's behavior.
And that's why I think for us, like the best thing to do is straight after an acquisition is to get on a plane and go to where everyone is and meet everyone. Because generally, like the old team have been in office, we don't really do an office. And I look at it from the perspective of like 5CRM, like seeing everyone in like face to face. We knew what each other was about, and we're able to like get down to the bare bones of it straight away. And you can see who's who by how they interact, what they do. And you do things like, and people may say like, this is an unfair measure or stuff like that. But like you say, hey, we're going to go for dinner here. Whoever's keen, come along. You see who turns up, because that tells you a lot about people, who turns up and who doesn't. And some people say, look, I really want to come, but I've got kids, wife, whatever. And you're like, okay, like I completely understand that. And they're like, but I'll try and get there tomorrow night. And they come tomorrow night. And it's like they had to go home, they had to sort some shit out, they had to come here. Like, you get that. That's completely understandable. Like, don't be wrong. It's not unreasonable. But you see the people who make an effort versus people who don't. And that tells you a lot about people. And that's part of the forming phase where you get together, you have a dinner, you talk about things that aren't work, you understand who people are, forms a bond. And that helps a lot when you get to the storming phase.
Yeah.
And I especially look at it when we look at an acquisition, is because the previous owner, the founder, whatever, had a way of doing things. And that way may have been correct. It may not have been correct. You find a lot about that when you're over there in person doing things. But we have, that I keep next to me, the Xenon playbook that we implement. And some of those things are tough on people. And it's a real big, like, culture shock to people. And one of the big things we do is we're like, hey, this is what we're doing. Get on board or see you later. Like, that's the two options. And so when you build those bonds, you understand what people are about. It makes it easy when you get into the storming phase, when you go, this is what we're doing. And people say, you can tell, because generally the people who I talked about previously who don't make the effort to do those extra things are the ones who are going to not perform when you try to make change because they're stuck in their ways. And that just makes your life even easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought you were going to say 20, 30% leave. And I was like, no, 20, 30% stay.
We're talking about in university, it's common across pretty much every acquisition. You get generally 20%. They're like, yes, let's go. And they go straight into performing because they've been waiting for that direction and the goals. And
we get to go and do things.
Like, okay, excellent. I've got a leadership. I've got purpose. I understand why we're going in this direction. And then you get 80% that are like, and they're either they'll slowly adapt or they're just not going to get on the bus, and they'll either quit or they'll quietly quit is the new thing, where they just collect a paycheck until you get rid of them. So it's important as well to be prepared to rip that Band-Aid off and get rid of them. But you kind of already started on the storming phase. So obviously the storming phase is next. It's important, sometimes you'll spend a lot of time in certain phases. Sometimes you'll move through other phases quicker. But obviously the storming phase is around conflict. It's around, okay, now we're in the team. We've sort of set the clear goals, but, now we've got personality conflicts, or, the old processes are leaking into the new processes. The culture isn't there yet. So it's kind of inevitable. It's always going to happen. I think the big thing here is around building trust. So for us, when we go into a company with an acquisition, I think what we do really effectively is we say, we're very transparent. This is why we're coming into this company. This is the performance. This is, you've been losing $40,000 a month. In 6 months, the company is going to be bankrupt. If we don't turn it around, you're out of jobs. But then the other thing that we do quite well, I think, is we say, these are the Xenon standards. This is a proven playbook that's been done time over time over time again. We've, gone into this amount of failed companies. We've turned them around and sold this amount. this comes from research and data. We've done this before. And that sort of brings not the calmness, but people are like, okay, they're coming in, they've turned businesses around. It's not all doom and gloom. And then we can start to benefit from conflict, right? We call it conflict, but now it becomes more of an open discussion. This is the direction we want to go. And we can have those open discussions around, for us, for Teamgate, right? We were given pretty clear intent, rip out of Lithuania. I don't care if we lose every customer. You and I got into the team and pretty clearly and pretty quickly we're like, I don't think we can rip out of Lithuania. Like this is, it's a very substantial. We've got a lot of control in that market. It's keeping the lights on. So we had to adapt to that. And we probably wouldn't have adapted to that if we didn't have open communication and we didn't talk to customers or talk to our employees. So, I think the storming phase is extremely probably the toughest phase, but it's a necessity, because if you can get through that conflict and start to learn how to manage the conflict positively, so much can come out of it, and you can actually turn that into being productive and idea generation and things like that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think a term instead of norming is like standards established, right? That's probably something that we use. It's like we have a set of standards. Those standards are now established, the routine's established, and then you build into that performance. And of course, you're going to go through storming when, it might just be for certain projects. You might be rolling out a new sales process. You might be implementing a CRM. You're going to go through different projects and let's call them working groups where you will have these phases as well. But yeah, I think getting to performing is, we get into that routine, but we're, on top of that, we've got the shared culture, we've got the shared goals, shared alignment, but we're in the routine and the standards are established. And so something that helps us is obviously you pulled your book up before that, Xenon standards. We implement that straight away. Does it mean we turn around into a high performing team? No, it doesn't, because you've still got to work on the culture. You've still got to work on that open communication. You've still got to actually perform to those standards. And it's a massive upkeep, right? Which is probably the last piece is sustaining performance. Once we're actually performing, how do we stay on top of that? You look at, as much as it pains me to say, the Penrith Panthers just won their fourth grand final in a row. And you generally, what you'll see for rugby league teams is if they have a short burst of success, say the Broncos were in the grand final last year. This year they finished last, or not last, but they didn't even make the finals, because generally that high performance in rugby league is short-lived because of wages. There's a salary cap. So teams like Penrith have all these great players. They win a premiership, but then they can't afford to keep everyone the next year. The goal with Penrith is it's a system. It's not a club. If you look at Penrith, it's actually a junior. They see themselves as like a junior rugby league club that have an NRL team. So they bring in all these juniors through that are all in the same system. Yeah, they just bring them through. And and like the Storm are the same. The Storm and Penrith are the two teams that they don't have the local junior system that Penrith have. Yeah, I think it was Slater. Yeah, definitely. And I think a big piece that's missing. So in my university class, there's 20 people, and out of the 20 people, they're all employed full time, all in, well, I won't say senior leadership, but they're in some sort of leadership managerial position. And the question was asked, like, do you guys do like any sort of succession planning or training? And 18 out of the 20 companies did no sort of succession training. So, you trained me to replace you. I'm training Chase to replace me. Like, that has to be done. And then how much easier does delegation become when you know that you've trained someone with the skills to essentially replace you? So you've almost got a clone happening in the same business. You're empowered then to take leave to avoid burnout. You can delegate to people that you have trust in, and you understand their competence because you've trained them to replace you. So I think a big thing for high performing teams is having that succession plan, having that training and development in place so that you can delegate and you can trust your employees because they're competent in the requirements that they're going to be facing. But the job market at the moment, I think you need succession training. Everything's a competition. People are losing employees fucking rapidly. Yeah. And something that's was really fascinating was, so my lecturer is a pretty well known business person in Australia. He's been published thousands of times. But some work that him and my other lecturer actually did was they interviewed every single CEO from the ASX 200, and they tried to find trends around, if I was to ask you what qualification does a CEO need, there's no answer. There's no like school of CEOs you can go to and go, oh, okay, this is what I need to do to become a CEO. But what was interesting was, out of the 200 CEOs that were interviewed, pretty much all of the top 50, so what separated the top 50 from the top 200, hired internally and promoted internally. So a lot of those CEOs came from the business. They weren't brought in from a third party, or they weren't hired for a specific role. So another thing not to ignore is if you've got an excellent sales manager or sales rep sitting there that has awesome leadership abilities, consider them. Consider promoting them or training them to take on a bigger role. Yeah, definitely. And there's been some really good examples around innovation and accountability and things like that. With, like, I think Google have, it's like an 8 hours a week where employees can work on anything they want that contributes to Google. So it's essentially free developer time. Atlassian did the same. That's where sticky notes were generated from. Don't ask me the company, but that was one of the innovations that came up on one of their innovation days. Atlassian's massive for it. So they basically have competition. You can work on whatever you want, but then you have to present that idea the following week. We've done it internally at Teamgate. We've only got a small team, but we would have a innovation day where we talk about, these are the hypothesis tests that we want to run in Q3, and then we'd frame the requirements around that. And this is how, we want to do a mobile app. Why? And then we start to look at, like, all right, what does the mobile app actually look like? Should we go, in this direction or this direction? And then, you have that open conversation and buy-in from the employees. So I think it's hard to execute, but start small with things like, have an innovation day once a month where you just let your employees work on whatever they want to work on, or you come in and have a brainstorming session to talk about goals for next year or improvements for next year. Yeah, there's got to be guidelines. Left and right of arc. Okay, how? Us versus them. Missed my job. Yeah, 100%. And that sort of leads into my example was the All Blacks. So obviously the All Blacks, very successful team. Famous book, Legacy. So if you haven't checked it out and you want to read about culture and building teams, go and read Legacy. But they essentially build a culture, and one of the big rules around that culture was no dickheads. So if you didn't fit in, if you were arrogant, if you weren't humble or on the bus with their culture, you weren't selected. And if you messed up once, that was it. You weren't going to be selected for the All Blacks again. So, that book is great. There's heaps of key takeaways around things like sweeping the sheds. So an expectation was, yes, we're sports stars, but we're not above the cleaners. So when we go into a stadium and we make a mess after the game with dirty boots and all that sort of stuff, we as a team sweep the sheds and we clean the sheds. That's not a cleaner shouldn't be the one that has to, tidy up after me. Yeah, they clean the stadium and things like that, but it's our mess. We'll clean it up ourselves. So, great book, great example of a high performing team and how they got to that and how they built that culture. So, rather than listen to us two idiots, go and read that book and see what you take away from it. Awesome, great wrap up, mate. Well done. Sure, let's do it. Like and subscribe on all of our socials, Beers and Business Pod. Submit topics, questions. Give us some guests. We got plenty of good guests coming up over the next couple of weeks, but give us some more. Guest episodes are great. We get the most engagement, and it's easiest for us to prepare for. So give us some guests. Give us some recommendations. Who you want to hear from, even if it's industry recommendations or role recommendations. We'll go and find the people and see if we can get them on. Tuesdays at 10 a.m. on YouTube and Spotify. Be sure to tune in to the next episode. I believe Abe might be dialing in from Hobart, so it'd be good to see the scenery and what beers we try next. Cheers. See you next week.